All right, folks, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this segment from MSNBC. I don't normally watch MSNBC, but I've been trying to find various news sources to share with you guys and to give my take on it. But anyhow, let's see what how MSNBC is going to try to paint Trump supporters as violent and dangerous.
We're, 4 days since the verdict? It is no surprise Donald Trump and his allies have had a lot to say since the conviction. What has stood out to you the most? Has anything surprised you?
The fact that they like to cite how much money they got from the conviction and...
Okay, that can't possibly surprise you. If you don't think that was completely preordained to line up those donors to manufacture a...
They call us the conspiracy theorists. They call the right side the conspiracy theorists. Look at this conspiracy she's running.
Positive headline. If you don't think that's the case, I got a bridge to sell you, brother.
Well, the second part of that is they obviously like to cite the numbers that work for them, but they don't like to cite the numbers that don't. And the polls that came out in the wake of this conviction have all been bad, and they know it. And
bad. Let's take a look at this real quick because I had this pulled up earlier. Let's see. We'll pull up the 538 Project 538. So here's the polls ending June 2nd, right? May 31st to June 2nd. Trump 44, Biden 43. That's interesting. North Carolina, that was up one. That pulled Trump up one. In North Carolina, June 2nd, Trump 44, Biden 32. That puts Trump up by 12 from the last poll. And let's see, June 2nd here, North Carolina. This is American Greatness. I'm not understand this. These are two different North Star Opinion Research, American Greatness, American Great. I don't really understand how these polls are, but if someone wants to explain that to me, please put it in the comments because I'm not sure really how much of these polls work. I just look at the numbers. So June 2nd, Trump 49, Biden 41. That's up by 8 points. So right there, we know they're pulling a fast one.
They just pretend like it doesn't exist. And I thought there'd be some pushback and they'd try and spin it. They're not even trying to touch it. And I think that is indicative of how bad they see them. They're not talking about the Reuters Ipsos poll, which there was a headline to pull from that they could have pulled on, which was 90% of Republicans still support Donald Trump. They didn't even touch it. And I think that's indicative of how fearful they are that the country is now against Trump.
Because they know 90% of Republicans are not enough to win him the election. Charles, is there any case the Supreme Court grants Trump his wish, steps in here and annuls this thing?
There's not a universe in the entire multiverse where this happens, Stephanie. Not at all. I don't think
You're
that
such
Donald...
a nerd. There's not a universe in the entire multiverse.
Absolutely. I don't think that Donald Trump... this is just an unserious request. It's an unserious remark simply because this is just not the way that government works on any level whatsoever. And so the notion that the Supreme Court would take an interest in and then somehow nullify the verdict that was created in a state trial is just unheard of. So this is going nowhere. And
I don't think that is unheard of. Yeah, I know most of the viewers who watch are younger, but was it? I think back in 2000, I think it was, the Bush and Gore election. They were contested. Gore was contesting the count, and they were the state. I think it was Florida was having trouble deciding which ballots to count, and they were deciding whether to count ballots that had hanging chads on them, which ones to throw out. Al Gore was trying to change the result of the election, and it was getting close to January when the president flips, and we didn't have a president at that time because it was still all being contested. And I think, if I remember correctly, now it's been, half my lifetime ago, but the Supreme Court did step in and said, stop counting, no more, we're going to take this. And then, I don't remember the details of that, but ultimately George Bush ended up being the winner. So
going there fast.
But he is going to annul this thing. Can you walk us through how that works, what it looks like? I mean,
look, hold on. Let's do that again. Listen to this. I just caught that.
Through how that works, what it looks like. I mean, excuse me.
Oh, darn it. Let me go back a little bit farther.
In a state trial is just unheard of. So this is going nowhere, and it's going there fast.
But he is going to annul this thing. Can you walk us through how that works, what it looks like? I mean, excuse me, not annul, appeal.
She said annul. See, they're letting they're letting the quiet part out. They all know that this is going to be appealed, and they all know that it will be overturned on appeal, but they want to run with it now, and I think that's been widely speculated and widely stated. She even knows in her own mind that was what they call a Freudian slip or whatever. She was saying she knows it's going to be annulled. She knows it should be annulled. Anyhow, let's go.
He's going to appeal it, but he's going to appeal it at the state level. He's going to try to find some sort of issue that took place at the trial, whether it's the instructions by the judge, the gag order, something, if not all things, and create an appeal and try to put that before the Court of Appeals so that he can stay off or stave off whatever sentence Judge Marchand ultimately imposes upon him next month, in July. Yes, next month.
Yamiche, is it safe to say that this is yet another loyalty test for everyone in Trump's Republican Party, especially those who want to be considered for the VPs?
Look at this woman. That seems like a very happy person right there. Look, can you imagine waking up and looking at that every day?
Slot.
It certainly looks that way, especially when you think about the VP contenders. They're lining up to really trumpet and echo the language of Donald Trump, which is saying falsely and wrongly that this was all a conspiracy theory carried out by President Biden, that this is a rigged criminal justice system. It's really interesting, of course, to see Republicans talk about the rule of law, talk about their respect for the justice system and their respect for America, while also, of course, attacking this verdict. And they aren't attacking the jury per se. They are attacking Judge Marchand and saying that it's his instructions that were the reason why this conviction happened. But what's clear.
Many of the left-wing media pundits and even Joe Biden has done this. They say, well, respect the rule of law. Well, the thing is, if you feel that you truly believe that the law has been violated, then you are respecting the law by saying, hey, we don't think this is right, and we want this looked into. We want this. Something is wrong here. That is respect for the law. They feel many Trump supporters and many people on both sides believe that this was I don't know about a travesty of justice, but certainly I don't know what word I want to use, but swayed justice, skewed justice.
Here is that the Republican Party, if you're someone who wants to have a political future, at least in this iteration of the Republican Party, it seems as though it behooves you to get behind Donald Trump and to really continue to trumpet his words. I will say it's also interesting, of course, as we talk about the Republicans, to see the president come out tonight, President Biden come out tonight and say, and really just get more and more aggressive with the way that he's talking about this. He had, of course, shied away from talking about this, but just tonight he's saying that Donald Trump looks like somebody who had snapped after the 2020 election, and he just can't let it go, and that it's driving him crazy, and that this is also the reason why he's talking about all these conspiracy theories, including, by the way, saying at one point that Biden and Democrats were trying to assassinate him when they were doing the classified documents case down in Florida. So it's really, in some ways, just interesting to see.
I don't know that Trump said that they were trying to assassinate him. Some of I know that did go across some media, and some of the way that they handled that, the Mar-a-Lago raid, it seemed suspicious. For instance, they sent in plainclothes agents with no insignia and their weapons hidden, and with the ability to use deadly force. Now, they know that Donald Trump is protected by Secret Service. So when they come in and start a raid in plainclothes, and if the Secret Service doesn't know what's happening, they have a right and a responsibility. It's their sworn duty to protect the president and his family. So, I mean, a lot could have really gone wrong there. I don't know that it was necessarily an assassination attempt, but it certainly could have gotten very ugly, very dangerous, and people could have been killed. And they knew that, Merrick Garland knew that, and that's why they okayed for emergency response teams to go there as well.
It's not surprising to your point, but it is interesting to see you have the President Biden really starting to get forceful on this. And then you have, of course, the Republicans are just falling in line with Donald Trump as per usual.
It's interesting. It's a Monday.
No, it's not just Republicans falling in line or whatever. I have seen, while the trial was going on, all throughout the trial, we saw legal analysts on every network, even the most liberal propagandist networks. The legal analysts were kind of saying, "Yeah, this is this should be either a hung jury or a." They were expecting either a hung jury or many, and on both right wing media and left wing media, almost all of them were saying, "Yeah, we don't even understand what this case is or why it was brought."
It's interesting, but it's distressing when you think of the lies that are getting pushed, or you think about the level of anger and the threats, because they have real consequences, right? We know a week ago, Michael Fanone's mother was swatted. Michael Cohen's family was doxxed after the verdict. How much work?
I think the liberals, the left, are the creators of doxing, aren't they? That's been their method for quite a long time now. Now, I don't know about any of this. I don't know if his family was doxxed or what. I don't know anything about that. Michael Cohen is a dirtbag. He's clearly a dirtbag. I can't believe that was who the prosecution's testimony was hinging on, because I saw something the other day at some point before when this case was brought to Alvin Bragg. He had made a statement that there was no world in which he would bring Michael Cohen in as the hinge point testimony. So, but then ultimately that did happen. So I mean, I don't know if his family was doxxed. I don't know much about that. I've heard some left-wing media and people who are on the left say that things like this, or that the jurors have been threatened, and I'm thinking, well, how are they? Who even knows who they were? Nobody's released those names yet. Not that I know of, not that I've heard. But it's funny she was talking about lying, because certainly there's lying on both sides. Anyhow, let's go.
Worse is this environment going to get, Hugo, between now and November? You heard Trump there. I don't think the American people will stand for it. Come on now.
I think it's a.
Did you hear that? She is begging him to say something to just watch.
Going to get, Hugo, between now and November. You heard Trump there. I don't think the American people will stand for it. Come on now.
See, come on now. She's egging him. She's encouraging him to say that Trump supporters he expects them to be violent, which is what they've said all along. I think the day of the verdict and the day after the verdict, they were frothing at the mouth. The left-wing media, they were frothing at the mouth, hoping for for a violent outburst or whatever that they could report on, and just paint a picture about all Trump supporters, blah blah blah, how violent and unpredictable and whatever they are. It didn't happen, and it didn't happen. That's because the right side isn't violent. If we look back over the last several years in political violence, almost all of it has been left-wing violence. That's why they keep pointing back to January 6th. And I'm sure they'll mention January 6th before this segment is over. They cannot get through a segment without mentioning January 6th. But yeah, that's why they keep going back to January 6th, because they don't have anything else. That was all that they had. That's the only incident of right-wing violence they could use. But with left-wing, we could go all the way back to, the Weather Underground bombing of the Capitol building. We could go to Ronald Reagan being shot. We can go. There's a long and vast history of left-wingers using violence for political means. So
I think it's a real problem, not least because the pattern and practice of how his supporters respond. And we're not even talking about January 6th. We're talking about the
look. I call that, didn't I? I told you they can't get through us. They can't get through one bit of anything without bringing up January 6th.
6 to 12 months of what happens when Trump even makes inflammatory statements about the judges in the case, kind of jurors in the case. All it takes is one person, one supporter, to act out in political violence, and then we have this road to a very dangerous and kind of problematic situation.
One supporter. I can tell you what, if one Trump supporter loses his mind and goes causing violence, and I don't know, North Dakota, I'm just going to sit here. So I just can't understand this narrative that they want to paint, that the right wing is so violent, and they always just keep building the pressure about that, like it's a powder keg ready to explode all the time. They want to keep it that way. Meanwhile, we see left wing violence constantly, whether just a trickle of it or whether it's a big event like much of the violence that happened during Black Lives Matter riots. But they always want to keep this tension and it's kind of like they want to keep the thumb on the right wing, like you better not act out. Remember January 6th? It feels like that. Remember what they did to those guys at January 6th? We'll do that to you. But to say all it takes is one Trump supporter to act out, and something's going to explode. That's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Situation. And Trump knows this, and his advisors know this, but they still encourage it because, it placates him, it makes him feel better that he can rail on social media. But they know as well, full well, that all it takes is one person to actually act on that death threat to Judge Chutkan, for instance, in the January 6th.
But it shows that Trump has ultimate loyalty from at least some Americans, and he can say, I didn't give them direct instructions to do so.
Yeah, his argument.
See, they're painting a conspiracy. They always talk about the right being the conspiracy theorist, but all this entire segment has been is conspiracy. Oh, well, we know what could happen. We know what they're plotting. We know what they're planning. It's all. The left is every bit as guilty of running absurd conspiracy theories as the right, if not more so, because I would say many of the so-called conspiracy theories brought up by the right keep being proven correct. One perfect example is Dr. Fauci. I don't know if you saw him yesterday in the congressional hearings, but it looks like, there was a lab leak. That's where that disease started. I can't mention the name. That's where that started. It certainly looks that way. There was a cover-up by Dr. Fauci. It looks like that's the case. There'll have to be more congressional hearing and maybe an investigation from the DOJ to really pinpoint that and get an accurate conviction or charges and conviction. But it certainly looks like that, and it looks hard to deny that the so-called conspiracy theorists from the right way back were wrong. I mean, the masks thing, we know now that the masks were ineffective. We know that the 6 feet thing just kind of popped up. All of this stuff we were saying, or I say the right was saying, the so-called conspiracy theorists were saying, yeah, this is all crap. They're just trying to control you. They're making things up. And now we know that was actually the truth, but she's making up conspiracy theories about ridiculous things and things that aren't going to happen, that wouldn't happen. That
argument is, oh, it's a heckler's veto. I can say whatever I want. If someone acts on it, it's not my fault. But he knows, and he knew since January 6th, because we have kind of
January 6th again. We got it's the only incident they have to point to, the only incident. So they are going to keep going back to that. As you can all see, they do it constantly.
The discussion around January 6th about how he knows if he does something and if he encourages people to go to the Capitol, for instance, they will go to the Capitol. And they will
go to the Capitol. And today they are sitting in jail. Charles, our friend Peter Baker points out that if Trump wins in November, he will have survived 2 impeachments, 4 indictments, civil judgments for sexual abuse and fraud, plus a felony conviction. So how can anyone believe that there would be any meaningful guardrails on Donald Trump this time around?
I would have to ask, how can anyone believe that this is legitimate? I mean, the man's 77 years old, and suddenly, just now, when he's become the president's political opponent for the second time, just now, all of a sudden, all of these crimes just come out, and he keeps getting hammered. I don't know how anybody can believe that is an accurate assessment of things. Why were I won't get into it. This is not the time for it. We'll get into it later, though.
I think that's a valuable question, an important one. And I think that the notion of there being no guardrails around Donald Trump is exactly why we have to get engaged right now with respect to the ones that exist within the system, i.e., who are we sending to Congress?
What guardrails would you put around the president that aren't already around the president? I mean, honestly, nobody talked about putting guardrails around Joe Biden. Nobody's ever talked about putting guardrails around Obama when he was carpet bombing the Middle East and drone striking American citizens. Nobody talked about guardrails. What are these people even talking about? We have guardrails around the president. The president only has restricted power. For all of the left wing's talk and speech about having a dictator, they seem to want Donald Trump to be a dictator. If we start putting guardrails around Donald Trump, those guardrails aren't going anywhere. That this is the government, the establishment reaching for more power by using the fear of a Donald Trump travesty or tragedy. It's disgusting. And if you watch the left wing, they will go right along with it. Yeah, the NPCs, they will not. Yes, we need guardrails around Donald Trump. Well, who's going to? It's unbelievable to me. People hate their freedoms. They're scared. I think they're scared of freedom. I think people are scared of freedom and liberty.
Congress, who is going to enforce the notion of checks and balances with respect to what the president tries to do? We already know that the Supreme Court's not going to do it. We have that. It's very clear. They are essentially and effectively in his back pocket. The concern about Project 2025, for example, and all of the things that we have already heard about what Donald Trump and his agenda is going into a potential second term should be an alarm to all of us, because at this point,
the Project 2025 isn't Donald Trump. It's the Heritage Foundation. They believe that Donald Trump will help to implement it, but I've read a little bit of it. I know the left wing is just terrified about this. They want you to think that it's like a Nazi takeover of Germany or whatever, or a Stalinist type thing. But essentially, what it appears to me is to make corrections in the bureaucracies, to put the over many decades, the bureaucracies, the DOJ, the IRS, the CDC, all of these bureaucracies have taken a lot of power that should belong to our elected representatives. The bureaucracies carry a lot of power. I mean, for instance, who's not more afraid of the IRS than they are of Congress? Do you see what I'm saying? In their daily lives. So what I have gathered from Project 2025, and I'll read the whole thing. Maybe we'll do a whole story on that. But what I gather of Project 2025, it's essentially just correcting the wrongs that have been done, the power that has been given away. It's correcting it and putting it back in the hands of the elected representatives who should have always had it in the first place.
Point, it doesn't seem that absent the legislature doing something about it, that there are going to be any guardrails. And this is a real concern because the judiciary has told us and shown us in so many different ways that they're not going to be the ones to actually hold the president in check.
Yamiche, while most...
Who holds the president in check? I mean, I'm serious. What do they want? The president is held in check by already the Congress, the Supreme Court. These are the checks and balances that have held our country, our society together for 250 years. And there's not been... What are they talking about? Guardrails. Somebody needs to hold. Nobody has ever talked about a president like this in all of history. Now, and this isn't just what I want to say. Somebody who is this is a president who has around 50% support from Americans. This is a president. So what we have is half of Americans trying to decide that the other half has to be restrained by them. Can you even imagine? Is that even a country you want to live in? Is that a country that anybody would want? And what will happen when this half of the of the country gets the guardrails and the restrictions and the handcuffs on this half? Well, they're going to have to use government. They're going to have to give a lot of their power away to government in order to do that. And then what happens is now government has that power. Now it restrains both sides. One side is used to restrain the other side, and then government has the power to restrain both sides. When you hear them talking about guardrails, they aren't talking about guardrails. They're talking about grasping authoritarian power.
And I'm going to say most Republican Senate candidates were loudly defensive of Trump. We saw their counterparts, Democratic candidates, a lot more muted because they think they're going to need crossover voters to win in November. What do you think of that approach?
Look at that. Oh, shoot. Let's go back.
It's an interesting approach.
In November. What do you think of that approach?
This is her face. She's got that, what do they say, RBF, constantly, resting B face. It must just be the way she, like I said, how would you like to wake up to that? I'd be scared of what's coming. Is she going to hit me every morning when I woke up?
It's an interesting approach, and it really just underscores the times that we're living in. I mean, as you go and look at the polls, you see that most independents do believe that this verdict was correct. But it also tells you that there are a lot of candidates out there that are maybe really looking at the American people and looking, frankly, at some of the Republicans that maybe are disgruntled with Donald Trump, and saying, well, we should be able to try to just try to convince them to come over to our side almost by any means necessary, which means in that regard, not talking about this verdict, not really sort of challenging the sort of echoing that we're hearing in the Republican Party. But it also tells you that we're living in a time where I think you think of the fact that this is a jury verdict. This is a verdict that, in a way that in some ways is operating in our American legal system, that you would imagine that candidates would be able to say, yes, I respect the verdict. But when you see that it's being muted, it really just tells you, I think, the worry there that speaking out against this verdict and speaking out in a way that sort of makes people uncomfortable, that is possibly going to cost people their races. So it really, I think, just
that's insane. We have a freedom of speech, and you are allowed. It's not dangerous. It's not dangerous to speak out. It's not violence to speak out when you believe a wrong has happened. We talk about it and we say it and we bring it to light, because only by doing that can we challenge it and get to the truth of the matter. That's the only way we can get to the truth. But they want you to. Joe Biden said it the other day. Saying these things is dangerous and blah blah blah. That's bull crap. Joe Biden doesn't mind saying all kinds of things about how the system is not corrupted, but it's not a normal Supreme Court and all these things. The left doesn't have any problem ever saying that the legal system has serious flaws. They say these things all the time, or that it's corrupt. They will in the same breath say, oh yeah, you have to believe this this jury decision and this court case against Donald Trump. But then in the very same breath, turn around and tell you that the Supreme Court is corrupt. It's compromised and it's absurd. So they think that in the blue district, a blue jury with blue prosecutor, blue judge, all of that can be completely unbiased and give a fair decision. But a Supreme Court justices will be utterly biased and corrupt by their political leanings. Do you see how they do? They just want you to be quiet. They just want you to not talk about it, you to not challenge it. They don't want you to exercise your freedom of speech, but they're fine with it.
Tells us that that's the times that we're living in. And if I could, really quickly, you asked Hugo about sort of, could this get worse in the danger? When you think about Michael Cohen's family getting doxxed, and you think about Michael Fanone's family being swatted, there's also the idea that these jurors, they're out there, I'm sure, very nervous. You think about Stormy Daniels saying that she was intimidated when she was on the stand. I also just want to underscore that.
Again, why would the jurors be scared? Or does anyone even know who they are? Have their names been really released, or their addresses, or anything about them? I mean, there was basic information that was given to the court when they were going through the jury choosing process. But as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, but let me know in the comments. Tell me, and let's have a conversation about that. As far as I know, no one even knows who these jurors are, except maybe their family and friends. Excuse me, sorry.
When we think about sort of how candidates are talking about this, how both parties are talking about this, there are also 12 people who put their lives on the line, frankly, when you think about sort of the political violence that we've seen in this country, who were brave enough to be part of this trial. I think about them when we think about sort of where this is going next.
The political violence in this country that she just talked about is 99.5% left-wing political violence. It's the left being angry and wanting to get their way, being upset and throwing temper tantrums to harm the systems, the people, the political leanings that they feel are in the wrong. And why do they feel they're in the wrong? Because they don't agree with them. So the political violence is coming from the left. The vast majority of political violence comes from the left. And I will be willing to rest my hat on that.
Max.
Charles, let's talk about a new topic. Hunter Biden's gun charges trial began today in Delaware. Jury seated. This thing's about to roll tomorrow. What do you expect?
It's going to be interesting. The prosecution is basing their case on circumstantial evidence. They don't have the actual evidence of proving.
That's funny. Look at this. Here's the timeline for this. This was supposed to be the whole time about the Hunter Biden Hunter Biden trial, right? So we spent, what was this? This is 1 second, and this is 9:44 out of 12. So we spent nine and a half minutes, almost 10 minutes of a 12-minute segment talking about Trump and Trump supporters and how dangerous they are, how they need to just shut up about their uncertainties or unsureties about trials. And now in the last 2 minutes, we're going to talk about what the actual what this entire story was supposed to be about. Isn't that interesting? They
that Hunter Biden had actual cocaine. They haven't sent anything to a lab. They have basically indicia of drug paraphernalia. And what their case is based on is basically saying that two things. Number one, you lied about the fact that you were either addicted to or using illegal drugs when you purchased the firearm. That's the first sort of two charges. Then the second one is you were in possession of a firearm around the time that you were either addicted to or using controlled substances. So a lot of their cases based on circumstantial evidence. I don't expect the political circus that we saw here.
I don't know how circumstantial that is. He put the he confessed that the evidence they're using is his own biography, his own book that he wrote. So I don't know that that's necessarily circumstantial. That's kind of his confession, his own confession. And I saw something yesterday. I don't remember where, but apparently they have text messages that the day after he bought the firearm, he was texting about getting crack cocaine and stuff like that, like having it in his possession the very day after. So if we want to talk about circumstantial, I don't, I'm not a legal analyst and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know the definite terms on that, but that seems like pretty convincing evidence, pretty solid evidence to me.
In New York, with respect to people showing up and sort of saying that this is somehow Biden controlling the justice system. Obviously, it's not. You have a Trump-appointed prosecutor. So this is not going to be what we saw there, but it is going to be a very interesting case for the government to move forward with. And it should be noted that even as this is a Trump-appointed prosecutor, this is not the type of case that feds typically prosecute absent a violent act to go with it. So you usually don't see these types of cases prosecuted if someone has not done something violent that would have triggered this. So if
that's true. The cases are often not prosecuted and not followed up, but most people don't write a book about their experience as an addict at the time that they were buying firearms. That's not really, I mean, how often does that actually happen? So I think we can agree that these cases aren't generally followed up on, and personally, I don't believe they should be. I think it's a Second Amendment violation. I think every gun control regulation and law is a Second Amendment violation. But yeah, I mean, he is right about that, but also it's Hunter kind of told on himself with this one. So
if there's been any political prosecution as compared to what we saw in Manhattan, it's this one.
I realize this sounds incredibly naive, but given what Charles just laid out, right? This is a Trump-appointed prosecutor. President Biden allowed this to happen.
This is a Trump-appointed prosecutor, maybe. I don't know, but we know that, or I saw yesterday that most of the jury are addicts or former addicts, have admitted to being addicted to cocaine or being alcoholics or something like that. I don't know. The jury seemed a little bit like maybe his peers, but maybe his peers while he was on the dope. But it's certainly closer to a jury of his peers than was the jury that convicted Donald Trump.
happen. Shouldn't this put an end to the argument that Trump and his allies are pushing, that President Biden has his thumb on the justice system, everything is super political? If it was, he would not be allowing his only living son to be sitting for this trial.
Well, he tried not to. He didn't want him to be sitting for trial. What was it, the DOJ or the prosecutor tried to hide this crime inside of a lesser crime plea deal. Only by the meticulous examination by a trust believable and a judge with integrity was that even discovered. It would have slipped right past if the judge hadn't saw that and said, hold on, so this is going to eliminate the gun charge too. And has that ever happened? Do you ever see that happen? And they're like, no, not really. So they did try to slip this right past. They did. Joe Biden and the DOJ did everything to avoid this happening right here. It's only because it was such a high profile case that we're here right now. It's only because half of America wants justice in this case that we're here right now.
Shouldn't this, in theory, end that argument?
Or even when the Biden Justice Department went and prosecuted Senator Bob Menendez, a Democrat in Congress, a Democrat in the Senate, when it's a 50-50 Senate. I mean, there are so many examples of this Justice Department making objective prosecuting decisions all the way through. And frankly, in the Trump cases, the evidence is so overwhelming that it would be egregious not to prosecute them. So that's the Trump cases. But in this instance, to your point, for the Biden justice...
If that's the case, then why do the Trump cases keep falling apart? Each day they seem to crumble more. The Jack Smith case seems to be completely disintegrating. The Fani Willis case is obviously brought up by a DA that is not credible. The Alvin Bragg one, that according to all legal analysts, that one's going to be overturned. That was a farce and a joke. I don't know. Yeah.
Justice Department to go after the president's son in a criminal matter. And remember, this is not the only case. We also have the tax case
in September.
So there's two cases actually against the president's son. And I think that is indicative of kind of how even-handed this Justice Department has operated.
Talking about Trump, like 11 minutes. So we spent on this segment here. Let's see. This started out as Hunter Biden. This is the very beginning. Hunter Biden gun charges trial begins. This was supposed to be the title of this segment, and we spent 10 out of the 12 minutes talking about Donald Trump. So anyhow, this is how the media plays you. This is how they steer your emotions, your opinions, your views, and I think I'm going to spend more time on this, showing how the media uses partial information and just sometimes straight up lies and insinuations and emotional. What do I want to say? Emotionally engaging displays in order to sway their viewers. And it happens on both sides. It's just that so happens that like 90% of all media is liberal, left-leaning. But it definitely does happen on both sides. All right. So anyhow, that's what I got. If you have any comments, you disagree with anything I said, you agree with anything I said, you want to talk about the Trump trial, if you want to talk about the Hunter Biden trial, leave a message in the comments. Let's talk. Don't forget to leave a like button. If you stayed this long, please definitely leave a like and subscribe, because I'll be back with more later.